Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, arguments, especially public ones, trans rights, phones in meetings, and poor engagement. The Railway Children. Yes, that 1970s film will help you think about something important. A discussion with Bina Briggs. Bina provides HR support for small businesses on employment law and employment policies. She used to be the HR director for London Luton Airport and is also an author. Question of the week. Do introverts and extroverts argue differently? What's controversial in the news this week? The argument about a new Prime Minister. What can we learn from the ongoing leadership challenges? Possibly it's how not to have an argument. What do you think? Introverts may be quieter sometimes, but that doesn't mean they don't argue. Expect good listening skills and possible summaries to help the debate along. Extroverts may be more talkative, but that doesn't mean they don't listen at times. Extroverts are not narcissists after all, who will be more likely to be simply stating and restating their words without listening, and then trying to make you feel small and wrong. But anyway, according to the Daily Mail, Monday's leadership debate was meant to be a respectful examination of the vision and opinions of the two people vying to be our next Prime Minister. Instead, it was more like a crude slanging match broadcast on live primetime TV. How do you handle disagreements at work? Hopefully nothing like that. Trans rights. A YouGov poll this week showed that 2/3 of British adults say they pay little or no attention to the media debate about trans rights. However, 49% believe that discrimination against trans people is a significant problem. Is this about somebody else's problem? Do we really think we have no need to pay attention to discrimination? Or are we just all bored by the press? Discrimination is linked to bias. We would all be better leaders if more aware of our biases, which does, of course, include the extrovert bias. What could you do this week to be more aware of your subconscious thinking? Phones in meetings. If you have ever sat in a meeting frustrated at people using phones or not being able to use your own phone because it's not allowed, spare a thought for Hong Kong town pedestrians. Pavements at busy junctions in Hong Kong are being bathed in red and blue lights to stop smartphone zombies from inadvertently walking out into moving traffic. The trial scheme was devised in response to fears that many pedestrians are so glued to their phones that they don't look up at the traffic lights. But if the light were on the pavement, it could save their lives. Back to meetings though. Where do you stand? Phones out or away? Can laptops be in use, or are they distracting? I'll confess to being a note-taker who doesn't always look fully engaged, aka one of those introverts dreaming rather than engaging. My notes often go straight onto the phone, and I'm very aware of what's being said, even though I don't always reply, like many introverts. I surveyed 80 people recently about not being fully engaged in meetings. 73% said they disengage more easily since we were all on Zoom. I would love to know about you. Drop me a note. But here's the point. If you want more engagement, run the meeting better. Consider introverts and extroverts and have a tighter agenda that only has the relevant people in the room. As a big smoke billowing train pulled away from Swanage Station this week, yes, we still have steam trains, I saw a man emerge from the steam. I couldn't help but remember the 1970s film classic The Railway Children. Then the sad news broke that a great actor from The Railway Children and several Doctor Who series, you can tell how highbrow my TV watching is, can't you? Died this week. Bernard Cribbins. Amazing voice from my youth. Thank you. Maybe it left me in a morbid mood, but how will you be remembered? No, I'm not so morbid as to mean the afterlife. I mean after staff leave your employ and as customers finish buying from you. Quiet, thoughtful, insightful, good listener, action-driven leader. I could go on, but perhaps we should think about who we want and what we want to be remembered for, and what we need to do in order to be remembered like that. It's certainly a good way of thinking about vision and values, which all leaders would benefit from working on, starting today. But rather than you worry I'm going to get any more morbid, it's time to move on and talk to the ever-lively Bina Briggs. Welcome, Bina. It's just so good to actually catch up again. We haven't seen each other for quite a number of years.
Quite some time now, yeah.
What I want to develop today is some thinking around HR support system, why they're important in small businesses, things like onboarding. But just before we dive into all of that, you're an introvert, an extrovert, and probably more importantly, what difference has that made to your business?
An introvert is definitely somebody who will talk when they feel it's appropriate, and it doesn't mean they're shy. And an extrovert is somebody who's fairly free with their conversations.
Yeah, really nice way to look at it. How would you describe yourself? Introvert, extrovert?
Oh, I think both. It depends. Well, some people say I never stop talking, but on the other side, I think we all have that side, a bit of each. I mean, there'll be some forums where I feel that I don't really have much to say, or I don't need to add anything to somebody else what somebody's already said. So there's no point in duplicating it. But then there will be times when I can be. I'm never ever the kind of life and soul of a party. I wouldn't say that, but I would be very happy to have a good conversation with people around. Flexible then, from kind of relatively introverted to somewhere in the middle and a bit beyond. Yeah. And I bet that's a really useful place to be. Yeah. Over time, over life, it's kind of taught to our lives, if I don't ask, I don't get. Or what's the worst thing that can happen if I ask a question? Before, I never used to ask the question because there'll be a dialogue going on in my head saying, if I ask this question and they'll say this or they'll say that, or they might turn me down, or they might whatever. And that the big dialogue is in my head, but not with the person that I need to actually ask the question. Really interesting point. The dialogue has to be with the person, not in your head. Exactly. You've helped many small business owners to grow their business. And we're not talking tiny little businesses, we're talking actually quite a bit more substantial than that. From an HR perspective, what would you say is the most important thing for a business owner to think of? Are they looking after the people? Because everybody is so busy looking at the business and how to make the money and how to get the profits in and what next they're going to do to keep the revenue going. And so the eye is more or less on the business model and the business strategy, but not often. Quite often it's not on the people. People come last. And so what should they do to be looking after the people? Is that about just talking to them and being nice to them, or is there... Well, that too. Do you know how many times, and I'm sure you've been in a corporate world, how many times there's somebody walked through the door, they have not even looked at you and then just walked right through past you, or they start talking to you without saying, oh, hi, John, good morning, and then start the conversation. Acknowledge your presence as an individual. That starts from that simple thing, like basics, to say, acknowledge your people, acknowledge who they're there, then have those conversations. But it's more than just keeping them happy to say, oh, are you okay? Are you having a good day? It's about knowing who they are, understanding who they are, what makes them tick. We're all different. We talked about introverts and extroverts just now. What makes them tick? What will make them happy? So if it's an introvert, what kind of conversations are you going to have with them to make them feel valued? How are you going to involve them in your business much more than what the job they're doing, or how they can bring extra dimensions to the job they're doing from their personality? But that's up to you as a leader, as a business owner, to know it. It's like I use the example of the business owners are parents, mom and dad. You are the parent of your company, right? You started the company. I'm not talking about corporate, I'm talking about SMEs. And that means that you already have become a parent, and then you put your children. The employees are your children in a way. So you need to know, it's like you having 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, or 2 girls and a boy, or 3 boys or 3 girls, whatever. Each of them will be different. You as a parent would know what makes them tick, how to talk to them, what to get the best out of them, what they want, what they need, what are their desires, what are they good at.
So where do support systems come into play then, from an HR perspective?
The support systems is about acknowledging them and appreciating rewards, communication, things like employee engagement is a buzzword, but what does it actually mean?
What does it mean? Because I have to confess to not really being
Engagement means engaging somebody, i.e. connecting with somebody. Do you actually know whether your goals and your objectives and wherever your future is, that you know where you want to head to, where you want to go? Are you sharing that vision that you have in your head or on your 5-year plan or 3-year plan? Have you actually shared that with your employees? Have you actually done that?
And I guess even more importantly, it's not just that you've shared it, they also understand it. If they can repeat
Exactly.
it back to you,
it's sharing it and engaging them to say, hey, are we all pulling in the same direction? Are you with me? What can you do? And how can I get the best out of you to contribute to that success? Because the success is for everyone, isn't it?
yeah. So I guess even things like onboarding systems. So starting that right at the beginning when you've got new employees starting. To me, a system isn't some fancy computer thing. Tell us a bit more about how you think onboarding should
Well,
be.
onboarding is all about, again, treating everybody as individuals. And yes, of course, you have your processes as a company, that there are certain things that the formalities you have to go through. So you've got your things like documentation and your personal details and payroll and all that kind of stuff, health and safety. But more importantly, get talking to them, get them to get engaged in what the company is doing, where they will come in, who's who, get them talking to each of those departments and understanding what the business is doing now, what their part is in the business, how they're going to contribute, but not only the contribution from the employee, how the business is going to support the employee in those first initial 6 months of probationary period or 12 months or whatever, or even the first week, first month. I like to keep things simple, plain talking. And that means, think about your baby. The new employee who comes in is a baby to the organization. So the first steps are so important for you and the baby and the employee, isn't it?
Things like onboarding, very much then almost a simple checklist where you make sure the new person is indoctrinated, if I can use that word, in not just the values and things the organisation is aiming to do, but also the people and the way people work. Should that be different? Should we onboard introverts differently to extroverts? Maybe?
Not necessarily, because I think you should have consistency. You have consistency in everything. One of the shortfalls of SMEs quite often is that they are not consistent with their employees because they deal with them with more emotion rather than practicalities and consistency and fairness. Not only checklists you were talking about, but it's also about making sure that they understand and they know and that you are imparting that knowledge to them during that first week or first initial system. And you talked about checklist, but also a very quick example of making sure that you're prepared. You as an organization are prepared for that individual when they join you. So on day one, got their ID sorted, their paperwork sorted, their laptop or computer or whatever it is, if they're going to have a car, all the arrangements are done. They've got a desk, if they're supposed to be having a desk in the office, is all ready for them. It's not the last minute kind of clambering around and preparation.
Yeah, I've seen companies where somebody's arrived and then they go, oh, we've got to arrange for you IT access. It's going to take the same amount of time once they've arrived, so arrange it beforehand. Bina, that's really good. I'm afraid we've run out of time. I'm going to ask you for a tip for a business owner to get the most from perhaps some introverted staff.
The most from the introvert is listen to them, really listen to what they're saying, but involve them. So that means you ask them, you invite them with the questions, and then they will feel wanted and they would want to really talk to you and they will contribute. They feel valued because they feel that now, okay, you have recognized the fact that they have something important to contribute.
Yeah, so I think that's really important. And so it's not just listening to them, it's making them know that you're listening to them from what you're saying. Okay, no, that's good. And how about the other way around? How could an introvert give the most to a business, do you think?
As an introvert, I think, again, they're always thinking. They're always thinking there. And, it just because they're not saying much doesn't mean that it's not happening in their brains. They are talking away. They're listening. They've got things to say. And so as an introvert, I would say there's a very old saying, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. And final question for you then, because I've loved talking to you, but how can people get back in touch with you?
My website is www.plaintalkinghr.com. I'm on social media as Bina Briggs or Plain Talking HR. So yeah, please do.
Fantastic. Bina, it's been wonderful to catch up. Thank you so much for your time today. Speak soon.
My apologies for the sound this week, but there were some internet gremlins attacking us. My takeaways from the discussion, though, were a leader is like a parent in that you need to really know your employees. Sharing your vision. Start with onboarding. Onboarding can be as simple as a checklist to make new staff feel welcome and make sure you're planning to do the right things at the right times. Introverts. Make sure the dialogue is with others, not just in your head. What were your takeaways? I would love to know. Add to a discussion on the Facebook page. Activate your introvert. What would you like to know about introversion in business? This week's question comes from Claire. Do introverts and extroverts argue differently? Fundamentally, we all argue differently, and under emotional or any other pressures, we might change the way we normally act. Just take the TV debates recently between politicians, and I hope that's a stress response rather than the way they normally work. When an extrovert argues, there may be a more wordy approach to it, a more emotional component, said psychotherapist Nathan Files in Psychology Today. And he says the introvert tends to be more rational and reasonable about it, less comfortable experiencing the emotion and ambiguity. The other interesting thing might be after the debate. After a tough debate, an introvert may be more comfortable remaining silent and letting others in the room make the running. Doesn't sound unlike normality, you're thinking. And yes, an extrovert is more likely to want to take charge and finish things right away. Remember, introverts tend to prefer to think things through, mull over arguments, the rights, the wrongs, and then proceed carefully. Perhaps that's the acetylcholine response that I talked about last week. Extroverts, of course, may want to give in to impulses and be more ready to communicate and talk. If each side sees the other's style as a wrong reaction, the argument will continue and fester. So the answer, Claire, is that their different styles may make them more likely to argue differently. But more importantly, understanding those differences is critical in resolving the issues they argued about, lest they argue about the argument, and who knows where that might end. In the moment, the introvert could say why he needs a break between a conflict arising and the debate happening. He might say, I can get overwhelmed by conflict situations that make me shut down. I'll be much more able to talk things through if you give me some time to think about things first. But of course, Why does it have to be the introvert that says that? Let's all get better understanding different ways of processing. What question would you like answered on the show? Whether you want to be on the show or just have your question answered, go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk. You could also follow on Facebook and discuss the answers at the show's page. Activate your introvert. I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.